It took longer than I expected, and to say that this game has a lot of content would be a misunderstatement. Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, in the first part of this review, we made it clear that we would soon make a continuation talking about the DLC content and a continuation of some stories that were unfinished. Without more to say, welcome to the analysis of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 Part 2. The material we have to cover today is not short, so we won't take too long with the introduction. Can we reach 80 likes in this occasion? That will be our goal today. So, where do I start? Well, I think there's no better way to do it than including the mission of Bardock's story, which, let's see, is not a big deal, but we have to close that chapter, right? To know what finally happened to Bardock after subduing Mira in that dimensional portal, we must do a large number of tasks to collect 5 distortion eggs. These are very important objects for the state of the time and its progression. Each egg must be obtained based on secondary missions assigned to us by certain characters scattered around the world, referring Vegeta, Hercule, Neil, Frieza, and Majin Buu. All of these tasks range from helping Cooler to train, feeding Majin Buu so he can have his own family, and this is a task that can easily take us about 10 hours. Usually this wouldn't be a problem for me, however I feel that the structuring of the missions is a little lazy and without much background. I know that they are secondary missions and I'm not wanting them to have a super script here, but I'm talking about the developers being clever enough to ensure that the complexion of these are not a headache for the players, that it contributes to the experience and doesn't lengthen it just to keep the game alive by force until we get what we expected so much. So what happened to Bardock? Dragging Mira into a dimensional rift, he decided to attack him with all his power, bringing out the Super Saiyan, Super Saiyan 2 and even Super Saiyan 3, a fight that takes around 10 minutes and ends with a conclusion that leaves more questions than answers. By accepting his defeat, Mira is trapped in that crack and Bardock's ki disappears completely. So that story must continue in the DLC. Not before showing us another temporal conflict where Trunks decided to help future Gohan against the androids, leaving us with the decision whether to fix it or leave it like that and see how they do. I decided to leave it that way. We'll see what happens later. I personally have a problem with this type of games, and that is because of its very disordered nature. There's exactly no established line to follow. I know that this gives rise to free exploration and is linked to the feeling of making one's own decision, but what the Xenoverse progression system transmits is very different from what a GTA or a Marvel's Spider-Man would do. They don't tell you exactly what you have to do to unlock everything the game offers, and that frustrates me a lot because I feel like they are hiding some of the material that interests me. I'm aware that many players and many of you enjoy the exploration approach, finding out what's going on with each NPC, but for me it's a very tedious task. I'm just wasting my time. I'm sorry, but it's not the same for me. And I wanted to highlight that because now with the DLCs, and more specifically those that continue the story, they do exactly the same thing. I was disappointed if I'm honest, but hey, it doesn't mean that the material they had to offer was poor. Quite the opposite. They first introduce us to the tournament combat between Universe 6 and 7, with a modification in the story obviously with our participation. We already saw it coming, it's the formula we've been repeating, but it's always good to see new faces and things that keep us fresh with the pace of the plot, even if it can become predictable. Repeating all those dialogues as absurdly unnecessary as the Kaioshin of Time gossiping with the Supreme Kai in the middle of the exam to enter the tournament is very disposable. It contributes nothing, you waste time, and apart from that, if you lose the fight, they make the worst pacing decision that could have been made, and you have to swallow 9 minutes of dialogue without being able to skip it with a single button. It's horrible. Well, the story continues. As expected, we fixed the curse of time, and definitely the cinematics are what make makes the game shine the most. You forget about everything that comes with doing these repetitive missions and you enjoy the tremendous visuals that offer. Now, keep in mind that in various missions they will ask you to have reached a recommended level. For example, the most appropriate thing for you would be to enter Goku Black's mission with a minimum experience of level 19, so it will be more comfortable for you to advance in the story. And what is my problem with this? Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 don't offer deeper challenges other than fights against the clock or finding Dragon Balls scattered around the world. I know that there are many more options, collecting objects, training with certain characters, repetition of history, but everything is governed by a scheme of game that I don't know about you, but after 50 hours of playing, I was already burned out. And I know this gives us room to experiment with more characters, more about the game and stay familiar with the gameplay. But damn, isn't there any other way to progress through the additional material that doesn't make me feel all this repetition? I know that multiplayer is there and it's one of the ways to have a great time playing with friends. They can help you in your missions and you can set challenges among yourselves, but even so, it's still not a product that by itself offers me hours of entertaining play with constant progression and not a tedious path that has to be done almost out of obligation. Excuse me, but I have played many games with this same formula that does not lead us to get fed up so quickly with its gameplay cycle. See Def Jam Fight for New York and Naruto Ultimate Ninja Impact. It's a shame that the game takes so much time and effort to reward you, because when it gets good, it's very challenging and entertaining without having to get to the point of absurdity. Those missions where the important thing is skill and not how much you have leveled your character are the ones that are really worth it. Otherwise, it continues to predispose me. Goku Black's missions could easily be some of the best in the repertory due to the same thing I mentioned above. There are transformations, competent villains, unexpected visits, and as always, excellent cinematics. Speaking more specifically about DLC, it's no secret to anyone that Xenoverse 2 is one of the games published by Bandai Namco that remains most active thanks to its constant updating with downloadable content. These are divided into 4 main packs: the Super Pass, the Extra Pass, the Ultra Pack set, and the Legendary Pack set. These including both a continuation of the Xenoverse story and playable characters and additional skins, so although these are not always going to be activated in order, they do have their background necessarily armed. For example, these can be linked with Fu's time glitch missions, and there will not always be coherence between what the characters in the plot say and do and what is reflected on the screen when we are already on a mission. Among these additional missions, just as Xenoverse old-fashioned, we find parts of the canon story mixed with some alterations. That seems great to me, because they also take into account some what-if stories that the community would like to see, such as Jiren and Kefla's help against Broly from Super since Gogeta could not transform into Super Saiyan Blue, or how Bardock tried to change his fate on Frieza's ship. I loved the appearance of Tapion, knowing how to combine old phases from the franchise that seem to have been forgotten to relieve brutal fights, although I simply wish that on those occasions they would let us use the new characters, but we are always with our character, and I was starting to get tired of it very quickly. Dabura would be another of those who would make his reappearance, creating an almost irreversible disaster with his supposed henchman and legitimate heir Fu. In the end, things didn't turn out in his favor. These missions are entertaining, easy to digest, and with a pleasant level of difficulty, unlike the vast majority offered in the secondary missions section. Among these experiments by Fu, we can see more brutal moments, such as Vegeta's fight against Toppo in the tournament, offering us incredible visual quality, a mission that demands a lot from the players but is one of the most worthwhile. It's very important to keep in mind that Xenoverse 2 is not, as such, a product to be valued only with its base version. This is a title designed as an active service that is periodically updated with new content to keep the most loyal fans hooked. That is why it may not be the right game for someone like me. I appreciate a product much more for its graphic and mechanical proposal in a period no longer than about 60 hours, the original stories, or represented as a fully fledged such product since the end of its last beta. The DLCs are extremely important for this community, and although many players don't agree with Bandai's business model to provide all the material available, it's a fact and a reality that many have already adapted to the game scheme, the new model of consuming games as a service. This means a lot of change for the industry, and it's not even the first or the last title to opt for this business option. So think about it, it's not just for the whim of charging us to be able to use Jiren or Baby Vegeta, it's also for the constant improvement of the game. There's no better feedback than the one from the players themselves in a community, and those players should feel lucky that they have their developer nearby to listen to what they have to say. However, we know that Xenoverse 2 has not been Bandai's last attempt to bring us the always beloved Dragon Ball story. In fact, there has not been a more important occasion for them, a clearer opportunity to do that in the right way, as faithful as possible, like at the beginning of 2020, bringing a huge game with an ambition that infects the most remote of fans. Don't miss the next chapter of Dragon Ball games because we have a very important appointment. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed the second part of the analysis of Xenoverse 2. Please tell me what you think of the game so far in the comments. I'll be reading them. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. That was all for today, and I'll be watching you in the next video. See ya!